bought the house back in the 20s and used it as a center for entertaining. That's the Rubinstein piano. Whenever he came through, he stayed here and played on it. And she knew everybody on the whole block where the OAS is, and these other buildings were hers. And when she passed away in 19 building, there are two more floors above. Our administrative staff is on the top floor. We have a sister. She works with the publishers. She finds publishers when necessary, encourages the authors, and generally has led to production of a series of books that have been very useful and productive in laying out the history of American diplomacy and giving voice to it in various ways. It adds what goes on in this series, in particular with Marjorie's work, is adding to the archives of American diplomacy, building block by block our history. So DACOR is pleased to be able to collaborate in this useful and creative enterprise, and we're glad to be able to have Marjorie Thompson to help us do it, to do the wise and necessary work. And then finally we have Ambassador Ken Brown, the able president of ADST, who will now introduce the author.
Thank you very much, Mike. For those of you who can tear yourself away from the buffet table, there are more spaces up here in case you can't see very well or hear very well, which makes me want to ask, can you hear me? All right, okay, great. I'm Ken Brown, the president of the Association of Diplomatic Studies and Training that Mike mentioned. We support training at the Foreign Service Institute, and we promote the study of diplomacy through oral histories and book publications and exhibits. And of course, book publication is why we're here tonight, and that is one of our most important activities. We're very pleased to join with DACOR in this series, and we're very grateful to them tonight for hosting this reception. Mike has already mentioned Marjorie Thompson. I want to ask Marjorie to stand up, and so she'll be seen. She's the guiding light and driving force behind the series which we call Diplomats and Diplomacy. We have another series which is called Memoirs and Occasional Papers, and Marjorie's active in that, and so is Steve Grant.
We have two authors from that series.
And we have two authors from that series here tonight with us. Another of our key staff members is Marilyn Bentley. She is back around the corner. Some of you can see her. Marilyn will take your money tonight. The book tonight is comprehensive but compact and priced right, so buy many for your friends. And like all good detective stories, the story that we are going to hear about tonight started with a random clue. That was an envelope that was up for auction on eBay. It dated from 1889, and it was addressed to Captain Peter Strickland, who had been an American shipmaster and the first U.S. consul of Senegal. Starting from that clue, for the next 5 years, Stephen Grant researched what one book reviewer has already called the amazing and varied chapters in Peter Strickland's life. Steve located and pored over Strickland's journals, his correspondence, and his 272 dispatches to the Department of State. He probably felt a little bit like General Half-Track in Camp Swampy, sending those things across the ocean by sailing vessel. The result of Steve's work is this fascinating biography, including the challenges that confronted Strickland in his 23 years as U.S. consul in Senegal. Now, Steve's book also brings to light something that I didn't really know until I read it, and many of you may not know. We think of the work of consuls primarily of visas, passports, recording of births and deaths, American citizens, etc. But over a century ago, the predominant role of most U.S. consuls was to monitor and to facilitate American shipping, including looking out for the welfare of American seamen. Now Strickland did this for 23 years without salary or reimbursement of expenses. And although he was allowed to operate an export-import business and to keep the fees that were charged to American ships that called at local ports, this was never enough. And he never was paid more than that. In the meantime, his family and himself suffered tropical illnesses, other hardships in that climate, and his son drowned in the ocean off the coast of Dakar. And those were the days before hardship differentials. Steve Grant is no newcomer to publishing. He's already published 3 other books. He's the senior fellow at ADST, and in that role is a key element in our publishing program. And we're very pleased to be associated with his account of the life of Peter Strickland. So ladies and gentlemen, I know a lot of you are very close to Stephen. Please join me in congratulating our author, Stephen H. Grant.
As you can see, my remarks are somewhat longer than those. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Ken. Right smack in the middle of Dakar is the letter C, and that C stands for consul. Peter Strickland was a consul who led a life that not a lot of people knew about, but luckily he left behind a legacy of 2,500 pages of a diary. When I learned that Peter Strickland had spent as long as 23 years in one post, I was amazed, because such longevity would be inconceivable for a diplomat these days. And I hastened to contact the office of the historian of the State Department to say, was this a record? It's always nice to claim records. And they wrote back to say, far from it. Horatio Jones Sprague was our consul in Gibraltar from 1848 to 1901. So 53 years, and I withdrew my plea. The U.S. Consular Service was opened in 1792 as part of the State Department, and the job of consuls was to promote American commerce and to protect American interests abroad. Peter Strickland was a Connecticut Yankee who never sought this post, but he was asked by the State Department, which in itself is quite rare. He had made his reputation as a sea captain. When he arrived in Senegal, he decided that he would live on the island of Gorée, which some of you know, and geographically, he was in Africa. So this is an island off the coast of Senegal where he lived, but administratively he was in France. This was a French colony. So think about that juxtaposition of being physically in an area, but the hierarchy that he would deal with was a hierarchy from Paris, the French Empire. Strickland actually thought that his hierarchical superior was the American minister in Paris, whose name was Levy Parsons Morton. And he sent his first consular dispatch to Paris. And then they said, why don't you read the consular regulations? And he read the 600 pages of the consular regulations. And from then on, he sent his dispatches to the Assistant Secretary of State. These dispatches are available on microfilm, and I purchased them from the National Archives. So we have a man who is important not only for his consular longevity, for his being a sea captain, and during that tenure he commanded sailing vessels from Boston and New London to the coast of West Africa, and he made over 100 voyages. What did he take in his vessels? Well, in the Merchant Marine at that time, what he took to Africa was mainly leaf tobacco. Leaf tobacco from Kentucky and from Tennessee that he would take in barrels. And what did he bring back? Well, he brought back in the hull of his sailing vessels peanuts. And peanuts is today the main export crop of Senegal as it was then. He also brought back animal skins. And the animal skins were used to make shoes for Civil War soldiers. And since he was from the North, it was for the Union soldiers. At age 19, Strickland started a diary, and his last entry of this daily diary was at age 83. Now, if you know of someone, or if you yourself have kept a diary for 64 years, please raise your hand. Writing about it. And in this room, several years ago, a kind soul suggested to me that I learn about a group called the Washington Biography Group. This is a group that gets together on a monthly basis in a Russian dacha on the grounds of the Washington International School. It's led by Mark Pachter, director of the Portrait Gallery. And at these meetings, Mark Pachter graciously invites 3 categories of people to attend. People who are writing biographies, people who like to talk about writing biographies, and people who are in danger of becoming the subject of a biography. And when we get together, we look at a lot of problems that confront authors of biographies. Sometimes these are problems regarding marketing. Sometimes they're problems regarding sources and getting authorizations. One of the questions that we discuss, for instance, is the difficulty of getting permission from heirs to use personal letters. In the case of Peter Strickland, so the line died out, and there are no family heirs present today. So I was not, in a way, this favored me because I didn't have problems with heirs, but I also was not able to obtain memorabilia which might have stayed in the family. For instance, he wrote that he sent 6 ostrich eggs and a stuffed crocodile. Well, I couldn't get to see those and meet those. He also sent a half a ton of decorative objects from Africa. That would have been nice, but I couldn't do that. I would like to read one brief extract from his diary, written the year that he went to Africa. This is 1864, end of the Civil War. Peter Strickland was 27 years old. 1 month ago today, I left my home in New London to go, I then knew not whither, but I now find it was for Africa. It does not seem so long, but time in certain circumstances flies very quickly. To look ahead, a lifetime seems a long period, and in some cases it may no doubt seem long. But if I am permitted to live to old age and look back on my lifetime, as I do now, and in the same light, I shall no doubt think that it has been short. I shall think how like a hurried dream it has all been. I hope that you will enjoy hearing and reading about Peter Strickland's hurried dream. I've been the perpetrator of 3 previous book launches in the developing world, one in Conakry, one in Jakarta, and one in San Salvador. This is my first book published in my own country. And I can't think of a better place to have a launch then in the Dakar house that Mike Ely described to you, underneath chandeliers made in Philadelphia in the 1840s for gas, but now candles, and they've never been electrified, and in front of an ornate gilt wood mirror from England from the 1760s. This is not your usual place for a book launch if I compare with where my previous ones have been. And before answering a few questions that you might have, I'd like to introduce a few people myself. One is my daughter Sylviane, who designed the cover of the book and did the graphics. And the second is my son Yonel, who is the photographer of the evening. Each came 3,000 miles to Dakar House. One came from the west and one came from the east. I would like to introduce my publisher, Anna Lawton. This is the second book that ADST Dakar has done with New Academia Publishing. I want also to mention Marilyn's support in this book project. Thank you, Marilyn. And I have something that could be called a royal tribute to Marjorie Thompson. Book titles are not the only titles that Marjorie collects. Here are some of the other titles that she's earned through her expert guidance of authors through the publication process. Baroness of Boldface. Countess of Capitalization. Duchess of Double Spacing. Empress of the M-dash. Excellency of the Epigraph. First Lady of the Flush Left. Highness of the Hyphen. Ladyship of Lower Case. Monarch of Manuscripts. Noble Woman of the N-dash. Peeress of Parentheses. Princess of Proofreaders. Queen of Comma. Sovereign of the Subscript. Ruler of Roman numerals. Regent of Recto. And Viscountess of Verso. Thank you all.